The NBA is not just battling on the court right now, it is battling for its identity. And Kevin Durant just threw gasoline on a debate that was already burning under the surface. What was supposed to be a routine basketball conversation about European development versus the American AAU system has now exploded into something far more volatile. We are not just debating footwork and fundamentals anymore. We are questioning narratives. We are questioning media bias. We are questioning who gets criticized and who gets protected. When Kevin Durant responded to the growing praise of European systems and the constant criticism of American AAU culture, he did not tiptoe around the issue. He suggested that when people say America is doing it wrong, they are often pointing the finger at Black American players who dominate the NBA. That statement instantly changed the temperature of the room. Jay Williams pushed back immediately. He argued this is about structure and development, not race. According to Jay, Europe prioritizes team systems, skill repetition, and long-term growth, while the American pipeline focuses on exposure, athleticism, and branding at a young age. In his view, bringing race into the discussion distracts from fixing the real structural problems. Then Stephen A. Smith stepped in and escalated it even further. He defended Durant's perspective, saying perception is reality for many players. He argued that American superstars like LeBron and KD face relentless scrutiny, while international stars often receive more benefit of the doubt. He made it clear that dismissing those feelings only deepens the divide. This is no longer about basketball mechanics. This is about control of the narrative, about respect, about who defines success in today's NBA. So let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and state or your country in the comments. If you think this debate is bigger than basketball, press 1. If you believe it is strictly about development systems, press 2. And make sure you subscribe because this conversation is only getting more intense from here. The moment Kevin Durant made it clear that the criticism of American basketball might carry deeper undertones, the debate stopped being comfortable. It stopped being safe. And it split the basketball world right down the middle. For years, we have heard the same talking point. Europe develops smarter players. Europe teaches fundamentals. Europe builds complete systems. Meanwhile, American basketball, especially the AAU circuit, gets labeled as flashy, individualistic, overly commercial, and focused on highlights over habits. That narrative has been building slowly. But now it feels like it is being weaponized. Jay Williams leaned into the structural argument. He pointed out that European prospects grow up inside professional club systems. They practice within a philosophy. They master spacing, ball movement, and team concepts before they ever become stars. In contrast, many American prospects are pushed into national circuits, shoe deals, social media branding, and constant travel at a young age. The incentives are different. The pressure is different. The development path is different. But here is where the tension rises. When the narrative becomes America is broken and Europe is superior, who represents American basketball at the highest level, Black American superstars, that is the uncomfortable layer Kevin Durant is pointing at. He is not denying structural differences. He is questioning why the criticism feels so personal and so relentless when directed at American stars. Stephen A. Smith amplified that angle. He argued that perception shapes legacy. When Luka or Jokic struggle, the conversation often centers on team context. When LeBron or KD struggle, the spotlight gets sharper, the tone gets harsher, the scrutiny becomes louder. Whether you agree or not, that perception fuels emotion, and emotion fuels conflict. Now the league is stuck in a crossfire between development, philosophy, and cultural identity, between system reform and narrative accountability, and fans are forced to choose sides in a debate that refuses to stay simple. Now the real question begins. Why does this debate feel different this time? Why does it feel heavier? Because this is not happening in a vacuum. The NBA is in the middle of a global shift. International stars are not just participating anymore. They are dominating. MVP trophies, finals appearances, all NBA teams. The center of gravity in the league is expanding beyond American borders. And every time that happens, the conversation about development resurfaces with more intensity. When people praise the European model, they often highlight discipline, spacing, and basketball IQ. They talk about how players are taught to read the game before they are taught to market themselves. That praise sounds harmless on the surface, but when it is repeated over and over while American players are criticized for being too individualistic or too focused on brand building, it creates friction. Kevin Durant understands that friction. He has lived inside it for over a decade. Every decision he has made, every team change, every playoff loss, Every social media post has been dissected. So when he hears America's doing it wrong, he does not just hear a coaching critique. He hears a broader judgment about the players who define American basketball culture. Jay Williams insists that we cannot ignore the structural realities. He believes reforming youth development is necessary if the United States wants to maintain its competitive edge. From his perspective, acknowledging weaknesses is not an attack. It is an opportunity to improve. But Durant's stance suggests that the way criticism is delivered matters just as much as the content of the criticism. And this is where the divide becomes emotional. One side says, fix the system. The other side says, be careful how you frame the blame. Both arguments carry weight, both carry pride, and neither side is backing down. The NBA is not just competing for championships. It is competing for narrative control in a league that is more global than ever before. This is where the debate stops being theoretical and starts becoming personal. Because when Kevin Durant speaks, he is not just another analyst throwing out hot takes. He is a generational superstar who has carried franchises, won championships, and lived under a microscope for over 15 years. When he reacts strongly, it is not random. It is accumulated pressure. Think about the timing. International players are winning MVP awards. They are leading deep playoff runs. They are being celebrated as symbols of a more pure basketball education. Meanwhile, American prospects are criticized for mixtape culture, highlight chasing, and social media branding before they even play an NBA minute. The contrast is sharp. And that contrast feeds the narrative that something is fundamentally wrong with the American pipeline. Jay Williams argues that acknowledging this contrast is not an insult. In his view, ignoring structural flaws only guarantees long-term decline. He believes that the AAU system, while valuable for exposure, has drifted toward commercialization. Too many games, too little practice time, too much focus on individual scoring over team concepts. From a development standpoint, those are legitimate concerns. But here is the emotional layer Durant is reacting to. When the conversation consistently frames American basketball as flawed, while European basketball is framed as disciplined and superior, it can start to feel like more than a coaching critique. It can feel like a cultural downgrade. And for players who grew up in that American system and fought their way to the top, that perception hits differently. Stephen A. Smith leaned into that emotional truth. He argued that dismissing how players feel about the tone of criticism only widens the gap between media and athletes. You can analyze systems all day, but if the messaging feels accusatory or dismissive, the response will be defensive. Now the league stands at a crossroads. Reform the structure without disrespecting the culture that built the NBA into a global powerhouse. That balance is harder than it sounds. Here is where the tension truly peaks. Because beneath the surface of this debate lies a deeper fear that few people are willing to say out loud. Is American basketball losing its edge, or is it simply evolving in a way that makes traditionalists uncomfortable? For decades, the United States set the global standard. The NBA was the dream, the blueprint, the ultimate validation of basketball excellence. International players aspired to fit into the American mold. Now the dynamic feels different. International stars are not adapting to America. They are redefining the league on their own terms. That shift alone creates pressure. Jay Williams believes pressure should lead to reform. He sees an opportunity. If the European model emphasizes patience, skill, repetition, and team-centric growth, why not adopt elements of that structure? Why not demand more practice time over tournament travel? Why not prioritize basketball IQ over viral highlights? From a strategic standpoint, his argument is practical and forward-thinking. But Kevin Durant's reaction suggests something else is at stake. He senses that the tone of the conversation sometimes carries a subtle hierarchy. When people praise European development as smarter or purer, it can unintentionally imply that American culture, especially the culture built by black athletes, is inferior or flawed. That perception triggers defensiveness, not because reform is wrong, but because identity is being challenged. Stephen A. Smith added fuel by insisting that narratives shape public memory. If American stars are consistently portrayed as products of a broken system while international stars are celebrated as symbols of discipline and intelligence, the long-term impact goes beyond development strategy. It touches legacy, it touches respect, it touches pride. Now the NBA stands in a complicated space. It must innovate without alienating. It must evolve without erasing the cultural foundation that made it powerful. The challenge is not choosing between America and Europe. The challenge is blending strengths without framing one as superior to the other. This is no longer just about who trains better, it is about who controls the story of modern basketball. At this stage, the conversation is no longer polite. It is layered with pride, legacy, and fear of decline. And that is what makes it explosive. Because when a league that has dominated globally for decades starts questioning its own foundation, emotions will always rise. Let us be clear. The United States is still producing elite talent at an incredible rate. High school phenoms, one-and-done stars, lottery picks every single year. The pipeline is not dry. The issue is perception. The optics of international players collecting MVP awards and finals trophies have amplified the narrative that America is slipping. Whether that is statistically accurate or not almost becomes secondary. The storyline has momentum. Jay Williams sees this as a wake-up call. He argues that evolution is not weakness, it is survival. If European academies emphasize fundamentals and tactical discipline, there is no shame in studying that blueprint. In fact, refusing to adapt could be far more dangerous. From his lens, this is about long-term competitiveness, not cultural critique. But Kevin Durant hears something deeper in the repetition of that storyline. He hears the subtle framing that American players are products of chaos, while European players are products of order. He hears the implication that AAU culture has damaged the purity of the game. And for someone who came through that system and became one of the most skilled scorers in history, that framing feels dismissive. Stephen A. Smith intensified the emotional charge by arguing that media narratives often simplify complex realities. He believes that when criticism becomes constant, it shifts from analysis to branding. And once a brand sticks, it shapes how every success and every failure is interpreted. That is the battlefield now. Not just development, not just tactics, but branding of entire cultures. The NBA is wrestling with growth pains in real time. The question is not who is better. The real question is whether the league can evolve without turning progress into division. Now we arrive at the most uncomfortable layer of this entire storm. Legacy. Because every time a debate like this surfaces, it quietly asks a dangerous question. Who built this league, and who gets credit for where it is going next? For decades, American-born superstars carried the NBA into global dominance. They were the faces on billboards, the icons in commercials, the athletes who turned the finals into a worldwide spectacle. That era shaped the identity of modern basketball. So when the conversation shifts toward Europe doing it better, it can feel like a rewriting of history rather than a simple comparison of systems. Jay Williams insists that progress should never be seen as disrespect. In his view, acknowledging that international academies emphasize team concepts earlier does not erase the greatness of American basketball culture. It simply recognizes that the game has become more sophisticated. The court has expanded beyond borders, and development models have diversified. Ignoring that reality would be stubborn. But Kevin Durant's reaction reflects something emotional and deeply human. When the narrative constantly frames international players as more fundamentally sound or more team-oriented, it subtly contrasts them against American stars who are often labeled as isolation-heavy or brand-driven. That comparison, repeated over time, can feel like a value judgment, not just about systems, but about style and identity. Stephen A. Smith argued that players are not reacting to spreadsheets, they are reacting to tone. He suggested that when American stars feel like the conversation minimizes their skill development or paints them as products of chaos, they push back instinctively, not because they reject improvement, but because they reject dismissal. And here's the truth. Both sides are defending pride. One side defends reform, the other defends respect. That collision is why this debate refuses to cool down. It touches roots, not just rotations. It touches culture, not just coaching. The NBA is evolving faster than ever. The question now is whether that evolution can unite the league instead of dividing it along narrative lines. At this point, the debate has reached a boiling level because it is no longer about statistics, trophies, or highlight reels. It is about ownership of the future. Who shapes the next era of basketball? Who defines what winning basketball truly looks like? The rise of international dominance has forced American basketball to look in the mirror. Not in panic, but in reflection. For years, the United States dictated trends, pace and space, positionless basketball, player empowerment. The league revolved around American innovation. Now, the influence feels shared. European footwork, passing precision, and system-driven offense are reshaping playoff basketball. That shift creates tension, not because it is wrong, but because it challenges comfort. Jay Williams continues to argue from a structural lens. He believes adaptation is a sign of strength. If European academies are producing polished decision makers, then American programs can study and integrate those elements. That does not mean abandoning AAU. It means refining it. Less chaos, more teaching. Less exposure chasing, more skill layering. From his perspective, evolution is strategy. But Kevin Durant's stance reflects something that cannot be quantified: respect. He hears a growing narrative that American players are beneficiaries of athleticism while international players are students of the game. Even when unintended, that framing can create a hierarchy of intelligence versus instinct. And for someone who has mastered both skill and instinct at the highest level, that implication feels incomplete. Stephen A. Smith reinforced that the tone of analysis matters. When critique becomes repetitive, it shapes perception. When perception shapes reputation, it affects how future stars are evaluated before they even step onto an NBA floor. That is the long-term impact at stake. So here we are. A league expanding globally while wrestling internally. A system trying to evolve without losing its identity. And players determined to protect both their craft and their culture. This debate is not fading. It is defining the direction of modern basketball in real time. Now the spotlight turns to the long-term consequences. Because debates like this do not just disappear after a news cycle. They linger. They influence how young players are coached, how fans evaluate prospects, and how front offices design their scouting models. If the prevailing narrative becomes Europe equals discipline and America equals chaos, that perception will shape decision-making. Scouts may subconsciously label international prospects as system-ready and American prospects as raw athletes. Analysts may frame mistakes differently depending on background. Even draft conversations can tilt based on storyline momentum. That is the power of repetition. Jay Williams is trying to prevent stagnation. He believes that ignoring structural gaps would be irresponsible. If youth programs are overloaded with games and underloaded with teaching, that can be corrected. If development pathways prioritize exposure over mastery, that can be refined. His argument is rooted in competitiveness. Stay sharp, stay adaptable, stay ahead. Kevin Durant's resistance is rooted in protection. Protect the dignity of the system that produced generations of greatness. Protect the players who sacrificed through that pipeline. Protect the idea that American basketball culture is not broken simply because it is different. From his standpoint, reform should not come packaged as condemnation. Stephen A. Smith emphasized that once a narrative gains traction, it becomes self-reinforcing. The more it is repeated, the more it feels like fact. And once something feels like fact, it reshapes legacy conversations. That is why this moment feels larger than a studio debate. It feels like a pivot point. The NBA is not choosing between continents. It is negotiating its identity in a global era. The challenge is clear. Improve the system without undermining the culture. Learn from international growth without diminishing American contribution. Because if the league gets this balance wrong, the divide will deepen. But if it gets it right, this could be the evolution that strengthens basketball worldwide. This is the moment where emotion must meet strategy. Because debates fueled by pride can either fracture a league or refine it. The NBA now has a choice: react defensively or respond intelligently. Kevin Durant's comments force the basketball world to confront an uncomfortable reality: narratives carry power. The way we frame American development versus European development shapes perception, and perception shapes legacy. Ignoring that emotional undercurrent would be naive. Players are not robots. They are human beings who hear, absorb, and react to how their journeys are described. At the same time, Jay Williams is not wrong about structural evolution. If youth systems can reduce game overload and increase skill instruction, that is progress. If coaches can balance exposure with fundamentals, that is growth. Reform does not mean surrender. It means sharpening the edge. The strongest organizations in sports history evolved before decline forced them to. Stephen A. Smith highlighted the most critical lesson of all: tone matters. Critique can inspire improvement, or it can create division. The difference lies in respect. If American basketball culture feels attacked, resistance is natural. If it feels challenged but valued, adaptation becomes possible. The strategic path forward is clear. Blend strengths. Study international development models without diminishing domestic success. Celebrate the global expansion of the game without rewriting the contributions that built it. Competition should elevate standards, not divide identities. The real lesson here is bigger than AAU, bigger than Europe, bigger than one debate segment. It is about how a global league navigates growth without losing unity. Evolution and respect must move together. Now I want to hear from you. Has this debate changed how you see the future of the NBA? Do you believe reform and respect can coexist? Drop your thoughts below. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video if you want more deep breakdowns like this.